All right, apples. It's a good shape.
So what makes you go from one place to another? So you draw the initial shape and then you go...
So I get like the base shape of everything. Now I've got the base structure of the apple. Laying in a structure is, the whole thing is very important, because then you can understand the ratio of one thing to another. Like if you're doing a face, start with your eyes or your nose so that you can gauge and scale where everything's going to be throughout the structure, rather than you get one eye that's way over here and then the other eye that's over there because you don't have a face structure right. This is a very similar thing because I've got reference points of where I want everything here. I can know what I'm doing. And when you're drawing something, unless you're going for absolute extreme realism, who's gonna know if it's not perfect? So, general shape of apple. I'm gonna go find my darks real quick.
So what are you trying to accomplish?
So the darker I go in places, the more depth I have. So I'm trying to lay in my darker, deeper areas. And I find my deep shadows and I lay those in so I know what, again, a baseline is for everything else. Right now I'm laying in a base layer of shade, shadow, or whatever, so you can come back and use your blending stump to do what you want to do here in a little bit. If I was just doing this with pencil, the direction lines matter a lot. Like, see how I'm going like this and making sure it's going a specific direction? You can lay in a lot of you could trick the eye a lot by laying in certain directional shadows and things of that nature. So right now I'm going to lay the pencil on the side, just get a little bit of base cover for my apple here. This side over here is going to be a little darker, so I'm going to hold it back here. It gives you better control. I can go dark, I can go very light, I can go everywhere in between. I'm gonna take some of that out, but very nice. I blended on accident. What do you know? All right, see how that, you can see that there's a shape to it now, or maybe not, but without even directional lines, this should give that some depth, right? So it's not going to matter about your direction for real. It's much more about where your darks are and where they're not. All right, so our line here is from the highlights, not like putting a black line. You notice I'm not marking a black line territory anywhere. So we've got some base in here, right? All right, so now you build up a layer on the end of this as you work. Small circles. So if I'm laying a base layer down, I can start in the middle here and move back. Now, if I want to feather that out into a lighter, I'm gonna push like this. See how that fades off into this?
So you're using what you've built up to create.
And so I'm building and I'm pushing it out into the open areas that I've left. And I left a considerable amount of open so that I can. And it's why I used a clean one, was because you're going to build up on here, right there. And eventually that's going to be too dark to like blend out. So you might have to erase off the thing or use like sandpaper or something. I use sometimes to clean my utensils and get them all back to normal. Right now, like I said, I'm just laying in a nice little base layer. Because we are just doing blending stumps, the direction of lines do not matter. They would matter much, much more if I was doing just graphite without the stumps. So, that one. So for a tinier line, a smaller one, I'm going to go to this. So, like, see how loose this is now? It's just in the ether. Mm-hmm. Now, we've got this down a little bit. What I didn't do was lay down a ground shadow. Now that I put this down, I know where my light is coming from.
Where's your light coming from?
Like kind of directly overhead, so it's casting a shadow, so a little bit longer is going to be out here. Light source is an extremely important thing, because if you don't sell your light source, nobody's going to believe that thing exists in the world. Alright, so I'm going to add a little bit of darker in that shadow underneath. One of my darkest values is right here. Like the values is the lightness or darkness of the color that you're using, right? And if it's color, it's not like my purple isn't more purple. It's how like how much tone is in there, right? So this is a darker value than this, but this is an even darker value than this. The darker you go, the more or less value you have. It makes it more real, right? To see that a shadow goes from this deep dark to a lighter thing makes it feather out and makes it look more like it fades off into the distance rather than just, oh look, he put down a shadow and it's just like a dark thing. If I give it some life, basically, it makes it look like it belongs in space versus just throwing a thing down. It's the difference between like 5th grade art and drawing like you mean it. So see how it's a little darker? I'm gonna go a step darker still right here because I want this to be my darkest value because that is my deepest shadow right there. And also right here. Yeah, I'm killing it. Now that's looking cool. Ah! I'm attacked by my utensils. Yeah, this looks neat. Huh. See how the bottom of that is looking more, it's got more of a realistic vibe to it than if I had just left. See how this feathers out and it looks like my light is going this way because our shadow's longer over here. That's the point. That right there is the point. All right, we're gonna move on from that ground shadow, which is not perfectly level, but yeah. We're gonna put some B somewhere else because it belongs somewhere else. Now, this is not an in-depth how to worry about lighting video, but however, remember that there is a cast shadow and cast light as well, like reflective light. So I'm not coloring my light or my dark all the way down to the bottom here. I'll leave a little bit of open because that reflection will be from the light bouncing here and it'll come up there. That's just a tip for realism because you can hit here like this, but you'll see that gathered light right there. And it's not throughout the thing, it's where your light is. So because my shadow comes down here and there will be some renegade light over here, it's gonna come up over there and that will appear more. There's shadow over here, but you'll see a little glare right over here because it's bounced from this direction, because you gotta imagine the light's coming like this, but it spills and it's gonna come back up at it. So I'm going from the side, notice? I'm not going straight down, I'm not doing all this, because as obnoxious as it is, if you are a first timer, you will learn very quickly that this is the technique. And if you do not learn to do this with wrist control, your arm's gonna get tired, everything's gonna fall apart, you're gonna get carpal tunnel, never be able to do art again. Don't be that guy or gal. So what I'm doing is, before what I did is I just laid down like there's shadow here, right? Like really, I can take my finger and make sure everybody knows that there's shadow here too, because there is. There's color, because the only way you're going to, fun word we learned earlier, Sesame Street style, delineate between your light area and your dark is to have contrast. Contrast is the biggest deal. It is a mission, or it is a part of the light source. If you do not have enough contrast, nobody's gonna buy it, because you can't get any whiter than white and you can't get any blacker than black, but you gotta figure out somewhere in between to do those things and sell it. And that's a big deal. The direction of my lines, like I said, if I'm not using a blending stump, then the directions matter much more. The directions are for me, right? So that I personally can remember, hey, the apple does this. Hey, the apple does that. Hey, it moves like this. So that when I get in here and start the rest of the blending, I don't lose that shape. I'll probably use the blending stump in those directions as I do it, because this is all a shadowed area over here. My light is, there's a little reflection here I would like, but really my light is right there. That's my biggest light. So up here, the only reason I'm giving any sort of a outline here is because I don't have any shadow really in the back of it to show it's a white piece of paper. So I got to give it some parameter, but there's less in some areas and more in others. So since our light's going over there, I'm not going to make this too awfully ridiculous with the veins, but you can always imagine as you're doing light, the bigger the thing, the more shadow it's going to cast. The darker the area, the more it's going to tell your eye that dips in, right? So I want the middle of this leaf to curl in. So that's why I'm doing that right there. See, I went over all of my veins and kind of destroyed them. Doesn't matter. Come back and deal with it later. Okay, so we're gonna come back with our, this is a dirty one, we're gonna use it anyway. So what I'm gonna do, come down here, follow some of the lines I made. I remember that if I'm looking at an apple, this is gonna kind of do this. So that's probably gonna be a little deeper. Smoothing this like this. It's not a circular, coming back with a circle, but I want a specific look. So, because this is already darkened, I don't have to like lay my hand down super heavy. Now if I want to go darker, shorter little strokes, really scrub that into the paper, right? Your pressure does matter. That is a thing that does matter, and you should learn your pressure. And that's all how heavy-handed you are as an artist.
Do you find that you're a lot lighter or more heavy-handed?
So I'm super heavy-handed, and I was in the beginning too, and I have to learn to dial that back, which is why my going further back, oh yeah, I was painting. Going further back on the utensil helps me a lot. But see, like, this is all a process, and you can lay layers in. I watched a dude, what he would do is he would scribble with like a dark color, and then he would get his graphite from there, and that's how he started portraits. And I was like, oh, it's genius. So I adopted that for portraits. I will take like an 8B and scribble up here and get just a bunch of loose graphite and get that, and you can do an entire piece like that. Moosh. Needed eraser. All right, so what I did here, and I did it kind of intentionally, I went in a little too deep right here. Watch this. Ah, what? Where did that light come from? I pulled it out. Huh. I didn't want all of that to go away, right? So what I did is I just dabbed some of it out with my eraser, and now if I want a more purposeful thing, that's when I get my thumb boat. When I come back in and I get this super tight area here, and then bring that area up. Then I can come back in and put shadow, but it's gonna look like that's where my specific highlight of my apple is. So I can do that up here. So over here, because the light's coming from that area, that's going to exist. That highlight right there. This is just a tighter eraser. This doesn't have anything to do with anything. It's just a tighter eraser. I'm not trying to pull out a whole bunch. As I'm going, I'm just taking out part of it so I can get the reflected light where I want it. But your paper has something called tooth, right? And tooth is how grainy your paper is. And if you, like with colored pencil, eventually it gets smooth like glass and you can't do anything with it anymore, so it's toast. However, and I'm just gonna use this 3 mechanical pencil to kind of come in here and dial in this tight little area just to sell the shadow. This is a kind of blending, but it's with a pencil. I'm just going into the areas I didn't hit.
So what happens if you've kind of overdone it on your paper? Is this something you just have to practice with? Yeah, and it's okay, because all of your mistakes are the things you learn from. Oh, and watch, this is gonna be fun. But you can see I'm pulling out the veins here. You can also draw with your shaders. Yeah, and so now we're gonna go in and we're gonna finish selling our shadow. The ominous 8B, which you don't draw with, folks. This is like the highlights on the end of your painting, right? Right at the edge of your shadow is your darkest point. And that's how you sell a realistic shadow. And see how I'm using directional lines here at the end, just because I know I need these things. I know I need to sell that. I'm coming down, darkening, because I already went this direction with my blender. I'm just coming back down, get my lead a little softer, because it was a hard, sharp point, and I'm getting the very edge of this apple to make it look cool. Just the very edge right here, giving you your real deep shadows. And look, this is your little groove area where it sinks in. So we're gonna get a little more shadow here. Man, this is looking cool. Gonna go here. Boom. See, so I'm not so much directionally working it. I'm looking at where my shadows are.
So if you want, you can just leave the edge of the apple open to the imagination, or like I'm going to do right here. That looks like a decent little, all I used was an eraser, different pencils, shading, and some brain power. So yeah, there it is. That's the apple.